Hello, hello, and welcome back to the StoreHero podcast. Today I'm joined by Adam Pearce, CEO of Blend Commerce, and more recently I've got to know Adam more so through his role as co-founder of the Ecom Collab Club, as I'm sure many of you listening to this are very, very familiar with at this point. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hammy. Thomas, appreciate it.
Adam, who are you? What do you do? Where are you calling in from today?
Geez, that's a big question. Adam Pearce, as you said there, I am the co-founder of a CRO agency called Blend. We are based just outside of Stratford-upon-Avon in Warwickshire, so not too far from Birmingham. And as you said there, look, I've kind of got two hats. One is in the sort of CRO agency space, and the other one is doing kick-ass events for ecom folks.
I can certainly attest to the latter for sure.
Good.
I've been to plenty of your events in London, obviously in Dublin as well. Didn't quite make the one in Barcelona, unfortunately, in June, but it looked like a good fun. It looked like good fun anyway.
It was good. I mean, there were a lot of hungover faces. Let's face it, it was an ecom conference. I'm not sure how much people actually took in from it, but yeah, it was good fun from my point of view.
Yeah, actually, look, they're often the best networking events, to be fair.
Yeah, sometimes if you can remember people's names.
Let's just cut to, I suppose, more so the CRO piece initially. We can maybe come back to the Ecom Collab Club later in the show, but um, I know CRO is such a complex piece. For every e-commerce business, conversion rate is always something brands are focusing on. As a CRO agency, like, what's the first thing you look for when you speak with an e-commerce brand?
I think the main thing is that there's this preconceived opinion when brands come in that they need to have their site redesigned, and we're still in this loop where people think they've got to constantly redesign. And I think what the first thing we tend to do is basically do that assessment of look, is the user journey on site as it needs to be? Have you got consistency across the site? Is it from an architectural point of view, from a code point of view? Is there anything on there that needs to be removed or cannot be removed and needs to be rebuilt? And at that point, then making that decision, because I would say out of 100 brands that we speak to, I would probably only say that 3 to 4 of them would actually need a redesign. And I think we've got to
Wow.
get out of this mentality that you always need to start from scratch every 2, 3 years because it simply isn't the case. And I think the other thing as well is that when it comes to kind of working out what to do from a CRO point of view, this is kind of why I hate the term CRO, even though I'm a CRO agency, because CRO is kind of, it's suffered from this kind of broken telephone mentality in that CRO 20 years ago was very much about looking at analytics data across the site, modeling out what's happening, finding out from customers what their opinion is on site, and then making a decision what to do. The problem now is you can go onto LinkedIn and every Tom, Dick, and Harry is saying, yeah, in order to increase conversions, you need to install this app. You need to do this on site. And a lot of the time, the things that are recommended might work for a small subset of brands, but don't work for everyone. So the hardest thing initially when we're looking to a brand is saying, look, what is actually happening on site? What are your customers doing? What are your customers saying? And it's only at that point that you can actually start making changes on site to make an impact.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is such an important point as well. A new tool is not going to fix your conversion rate. It's only as good as the person using the tool. And if you haven't diagnosed the underlying problems in the first place, putting a plaster, you're effectively putting a band-aid on the solution as opposed to solving it from first principles. So I think that's such an important point. Um, One piece we consistently come across with many of the Store Hero brands is, particularly as they're looking to scale, is that they're not happy with the trade-off between what is great for the business in terms of often really profitable growth for the business, but there's a trade-off in terms of conversion rate. For an agency that is specializing on helping brands optimize their conversion rate, is there instances, or how do you, I suppose, bridge that gap of a conversation when maybe conversion rate isn't always the metric that you should be absolutely trying to maximize?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one because I think you have generally in kind of conversations, you would have, for example, head of retention, head of growth or paid, you would have the e-commerce manager and maybe the head of commercial. Now, generally in those companies, those 4 people have got 4 different objectives. And it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to get that agreement, within the company about what they need to do. And I think one of the things that we particularly found is, particularly when you've got a head of brand involved in that conversation, they care about how things look. They want beautiful, they want sexy, they want this, they want that, the other. And it's a very difficult conversation to have sometimes is that look, we can improve your conversion rate if we do this thing, but the trade-off of that is going to be that it's not going to look as sleek as it probably did before. And there's always that kind of mentality of, well, if it doesn't look sleek, people aren't going to convert. I would say that some of the best performing websites we've worked on are probably some of the most boring, conventional, bland websites that we've ever worked on. But the reason they work is because of the functionality that they've got on them that takes people through easily to get them through to purchasing their product works. And the same goes, again with average order value, that is always another big factor that we have to play in, because we are trying as an agency to increase the revenue and the lifetime value of each of those customers. Sometimes the things that you need to do go against the grain of how things look, and that's the biggest blocker, I think, particularly with brands that have been built by a founder who have always focused on the aesthetic, particularly if they're not technical or from e-commerce, of getting that trade-off between the two. And that's the battle that I have, all the time. I've literally just got off a call with a brand who's in that position, and I've had that same conversation just now. So I'm in that process of trying to show the evidence of, okay, look, if you did this thing, yes, it doesn't look that way anymore, but it's functional and it's going to give you that boost in AOV that you're looking for.
Like a lot of conversations that we have with, a lot of paid media agencies where the founder mightn't like the aesthetic of the paid media asset or whatever it is, but it's converting. And I mean, do you turn off the ad that is absolutely crushing it because it's not on brand, or do you want an ad that's out there that's absolutely crushing it for you? It's a balancing act, and really, I suppose you should be going with what's performing best.
Yeah, and I think it's like this as well, Thomas. I think when you deal with kind of e-commerce brands and clients, it's basically that trust that you can build up between the two. And I think there's a lot to be said about spending time as an agency, as a tech provider, of developing that relationship. Because if you make sure that there is that element of trust, that number one, as the agency as a tech provider, you know what you're doing, you've done this before, that is going to give you more license, I think, to push the boundaries of what they might expect. And I think a lot of the time, when brands work with agencies and they're promised the world, which, unfortunately in my industry, that is what happens. Guarantees get made. We're going to lift you by X amount, guaranteed. The expectation of that is just going to happen, and it's going to happen in the way that you foresee it as the brand owner happening. But if you say from outset, guys, we are going to put things forward to you that are going completely against the grain of what you've done. We're going to be putting things forward to you, like I said, there are creatives that you would not put out there yourself. Do you trust us based on the case studies that you've seen, the customers of ours that you've spoken to, that we can deliver you results and still make sure that your brand is growing? I think, getting to that point can be shorter or longer depending on who that client is. But for me, that is the absolute key of making that relationship work between agency and brand. If you haven't got that there, you're going to come to an impasse. And look, trust me, I've been there many times in the past. It's not a nice situation to be in for both parties.
100%. I was actually speaking to a brand owner during the week. They're doing about 2 million in an apparel-based brand in the States. Um, Scaling nicely. I don't think the site is that optimized, but I can see the fundamentals of the business are incredible. And what I was trying to say to them is, before you go and maybe put petrol on the fire that is paid media, I would like they don't have a bad conversion rate. I just think the site maybe isn't as optimized as it could be. But I suppose a term you're very familiar with is in the CRO world is that leaky bucket. And I was saying, before we go and, pour petrol on the fire that is paid media, I would like you to go and just fix the leaky bucket so that when we do turn on that tap, that we're just making sure we're as efficient as possible. You'll probably do a much better job than I will in terms of explaining what the leaky bucket is. And it'd be great to just kind of get your take on maybe what that brand or what any brand in a similar situation should be looking at as they're looking to approach paid media spend.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the key thing is particularly when you drive and paid traffic, as you would probably talk about a lot, Thomas, is when you're in that situation that you are driving paid ads to different landing pages. And I think sometimes there can be two issues here. One is that all of the paid spend is going towards one landing page, which sometimes for even big brands is the homepage, which in my mind is just nuts, but still unfortunately see it a lot. And the second thing is that when you are then driving that traffic in to each of the different landing pages, understanding what people are doing, and like you said there with the leaky bucket, certain things like, for example, so if you're sending people to a particular product page and they're exiting at 75% scroll, what are the factors on site that we think could be impacting on that exit at that point? It may be that certain products, when people are getting through to the actual cart or checkout, that's the point at which they're abandoning. So what is happening in there that we need to A/B test and sort out before we send any more traffic to it? So you can use things like Microsoft Clarity free of charge. You can use
Great
Hotjar,
tool.
fantastic tools. Lucky Orange again from a mobile point of view. But until you do that, and you're looking to improve the efficiency of that ad spend, there really isn't any more point, like you said there, pouring more petrol on the fire, because ultimately it doesn't work well for the brand and it doesn't work well for the agency, because in that situation, unless the capsule that you're sending all this to, i.e. your website, is secure and is tight, it's madness to keep sending more cash there. So it's hard because I think, again, when you've got brands that have maybe scaled over the past sort of 10 to 15 years, they came through that heyday of ROAS being sort of 10, 12, 15. Wonderful. It was great. It was child's play. But now we're in a time where ROAS is close to the 1.2 to 2.5 mark. You haven't got that sort of, sort of put some cash in, get some cash out. You've got to make sure the thing that you're sending to is there. And it doesn't, in all honesty, take a lot of time to work out what's going wrong. It really, really doesn't. But it just is about that point of pausing, understanding, A/B testing that thing, and then going back to it and putting more cash through the funnel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think too many brands and agencies, paid media agencies in particular, view the Meta Ads or Google Ads account as the entire business without really giving too much focus to, optimizing CRO. If you can double your conversion rate from 1 to 2%, your CAC goes down by 50%. I mean, it's a massive trade-off. And I suppose in
Yeah.
the world that you just alluded to there, where that ROAS has gone down to like 1.2 to 2.5, the cost to acquire customers in the last 2, 3 years is like, it's completely alien to what it was in 2020. And every brand is struggling with that. There's no two ways about it. And if you're not looking at on-site optimization as a way to improve your paid media spend, it needs to be a really holistic approach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I would say, just a quick tip for people listening as well on that front. One of the things that has worked exceptionally well for brands that use paid, we as an agency don't do paid ads. We work with those
Yeah,
agencies and individuals. But when people start using on-site quizzes for actually directing people to those from paid media, we saw a massive uptick there in terms of the ROAS, because I think there was two things on that. Number one, people were converting on those quizzes at around about 20-25% and still are, which is great. But I think the other factor of that is that when you then use something like an on-site quiz, you're gathering that data, which does two things. One is you then basically then have a lookalike audience based on the profiles that have been created off the back of those people, which then feeds back to the paid media agency. And secondly, from a retention point of view, one of our previous clients, Hunter and Gather, we did this for them. They are kind of a paleo and keto condiments company. All of that data that was then collated in their quiz then feeds into Klaviyo, and every piece of marketing goes out based on their preferences. So if we know, for example, that they are trying to increase muscle mass, the blog content that goes out in the weekly newsletter is related to that. If they're looking to do weight loss, there is one on weight loss. And then the products that then sit within those emails are the same. So I think, just as kind of a quick thing that people can do very easily, and again, making sure that what is happening needs to happen with paid ads. That's something that I just observed from, working with brands that are doing that.
yeah. We actually ran an event recently with Octane AI, and they had a couple of their speakers on there as well, and just very, very similar train of thought. Obviously, that's what those guys do really, really well. But yeah, they echoed all of the kind of points that you just touched on there. We're recording this on the 14th of August. I don't really want to mention it, but it's not too far away. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, BFCM. From a CRO perspective, people are still probably coming home after holidays and they're probably telling me to shut up. But from a CRO perspective, it's the middle of August, start of September. What should brands be doing now to prepare themselves for the rush that is Black Friday?
Good question. So if you were listening on the 14th of August, you basically have until the end of the month to kick things off. And what I mean by that
Cool.
is that from the point of view of looking how things pan out from now, this is what I would be recommending doing. So if you can before the 1st September, you need to then spend that 30 days doing your analysis. So you need make sure you have got it ready, Hotjar, Microsoft Clarity on site, and you need to be doing those heat map analyses. The second thing you then need to be doing is also then looking at the previous data, obviously from last Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and also making sure that in terms of your segments that you're email marketing to, that they are correct and they're valid. I would highly recommend that if you're a brand that is doing probably in excess of 5 million, to use something like RFM segmentation, because what that's going to do then is going to make sure that you can then, if you are going to be doing offers over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you've got the right people to actually target. Once you've done that, then that gets you into October. So October for me is really the crunch time in terms of implementation of CRO. A lot needs to happen in October in terms of implementation. Ideally, you want to be locking down the site really within the first or second week of November. You don't really make any more changes in there, because ultimately that period from sort of, the middle or sort of first couple of weeks of November to Black Friday is where you're making sure that those changes that you made on site are working the way that they should be working. There aren't any customer service issues, there aren't any speed issues, and there aren't any functionality issues. So effectively, you need to start 1st of September if you haven't started already and get that in play. If you go to an agency in mid-October and say, I need someone to do a CRO audit, I think it's too late.
Take the advice on board, guys. Adam, you've worked with hundreds of brands at this stage. You've seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would imagine. What's the most common mistake people are making from a CRO perspective that they're not aware of?
I would say the main one is generally still around the product page. And believe it or not, people are still not understanding that the product page is the most valuable part of their real estate. So a couple of examples for you here. I spoke to, countless brands do this. I do an analysis before I do each call. I look at social media profiles, I look at their site, I try and get some information about their SEO rankings. And what I always see at the moment is one very common thing. They have a fantastic TikTok account, thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and the product is in those TikTok videos. I then go to their product page, and on the product page, there are 3 static images of that product. The product descriptions are basically usually pretty uninspiring. There is no consideration of those product descriptions to SEO. They have dumped all of the text about that product in one block. There's no accordions. There's no reviews on the product page, but there is a reviews page in the main navigation. So what I would say is look at your site if you haven't done already. If you have guarantees, if you have trust factors that are used elsewhere, why the hell are they not on your product page? And it drives me bloody mad, because these things, you don't need an agency like me to come in and tell you to do. You can do the vast majority of these things yourselves, but you've got to remember that product page, especially if you're doing paid ads, you've got to show everything as much as possible as you can on that product page. And it's like, we've seen some really big, in terms of that video piece, that you can use a tool like VideoWise, for example, that will help you then pull in, the videos to that product page. When you click on that video, it will actually have a call to action button to buy. That works fantastically. But it's all these things, in terms of looking at a brand, when they come to from our conversion rate is stagnant, our AOV is stagnant, you've got so many resources that you're not showing people because they're elsewhere on the site. People don't give a shit about that. They're on that product page to have a look at what you're doing. If it's not there, they are not going to go elsewhere on the site. They're verifying you from there. And particularly when you're a brand that's, doing 70, 80% of traffic on mobile, 100% they're not navigating around the site. Product page is where it's got to be.
Product page, very interesting. We actually had Claudio from VideoWise on here probably 2 weeks ago as well. Really brilliant episode. Great tool as well. I mean, even a lot of our own customers are using it as well. And just to your point, I come across those brands too. They're killing it on social. The content that they're creating from an organic and a UGC perspective it's incredible. and then you go onto the product page and it's not there, and you're like, why? So many brands are really struggling to do the hard part, which is create the
Exactly.
content. You've done the hard part, make it easy for yourself, and it will work. There's no two ways about it.
I feel like I'm on a bit of a personal rant here, but I think it's the same mentality with restaurants, particularly restaurants that are new in London, is that these amazing TikToks or this amazing food that you want to go and actually, buy and sit down in the restaurant, and you go to their website and you have to email them to make a booking. Why the hell have you not got a booking form or a booking tool on your site? It's simple stuff, but I think, like you say there, Thomas, people focus in like 200% on one thing and 0% on the other. And you've got to learn to actually spread out that effort and that budget across different parts of the business. And it's same with acquisition and retention and CRO and email marketing. You've got to spread it out more rather than just going, look, Facebook ads used to work for us. It's all in there. You've got to consider the other channels that you've also got as well, because you can't rely on that eggs in one basket thing. Any channel you look at, it's madness to do that.
The eggs in one basket piece is an interesting one because that basket has previously been meta ads for years. I think
Yep.
the modern day e-commerce operator, marketer, whatever you want to call it, needs to be more T-shaped. You need a skill set in acquisition, conversion, retention, and general business knowledge to really make the business tick. I think the margin for, as those customer acquisition costs on Meta and Google have skyrocketed, the margin for error for not understanding the other components of the business it's gone, really.
Yep.
You can't really operate with that eggs in one basket strategy, and you do need to optimize every area of the business, which is hard. There's only so many hours in the day,
Oh,
but
100%.
it's a tricky one.
Definitely. And I think, going back to your point earlier, about, sort of that over reliance on ads. And like you said there with the CRO play, this very well as do I, is that we need to make sure that each of these things aren't operating in silos. And, I've seen this happen many times before. And, with Blend as well, you've got a brand that is working with an SEO agency, a paid agency, and a CRO agency. You've probably been in these conversations as well. The CRO agency is saying one thing, you're saying the other, SEO agency saying the other thing. If there isn't that sync up between them, either being orchestrated by the brand, putting out that information to what the different objectives are, or, we've had it before where we've sat down with the SEO agency of brands and said, look, from an on-site SEO point of view, what is the objective over the next 6 months? If we know actually that it is ranking for a particular keyword or term or long tail, we're then going to make sure that there are more opportunities on that site from a functionality point of view to include those meta descriptions, to include that particular long tail keyword text within it. So that then you've got that sync with the two happening. If you don't do that, it just gets into that crappy situation of the brand where, our agents report on this thing, paid reports on this thing, SA reports on this thing. The brand's going, but there isn't more money in my bank account.
Yes.
And that's all that matters, and we've got to get better at it, as brands and as agencies, and we've all got to be part of the solution. But it's hard to do. It's hard to orchestrate. It's hard to get people to work together sometimes.
Couldn't agree anymore. We've mentioned VideoWise for obviously importing, UGC across Meta, Google, TikTok onto the product page. We've mentioned Octane AI from a quizzes perspective, gathering first-party data, using it for, product recommendations, even into our retention flow through Klaviyo. What other tools, or what would be your top tools for a brand to implement? Now, we're not saying tools solve everything, but obviously there is amazing tools out there to help enhance your conversion rate optimization. If you were to pick like 3 or 4 top tools that a brand should at least evaluate from a CRO perspective today, what would you look at?
I think, first of all, so you mentioned obviously VideoWise there and obviously Klaviyo, but I think, look, in terms of email marketing on that point, I think the market is wide open right now. And I would say, look, as an agency has worked a lot with Klaviyo, we are definitely seeing a shift in the market to people looking at other solutions. So looking at Yotpo, looking at Brevo, looking at
Send
OmniSend, there's quite a few that are coming out there. And I think the main thing I would say is that when you're looking at solutions, look at those integrations with what you've got currently to work out also part of what your need is. I think one of the things that I'm very excited about at the moment is a tool called order editing. There's a guy called Hamish that if
Hamish.
people are on LinkedIn will know. I've met him in Australia. Big, tall Aussie fella. You can't miss him. That is a very exciting app for me because I think from that ability, as an agency, our game is a lot of the time to increase that AOV. So you have an ability to then, once a person's complete an order, to allow them to add on a bolt-on product, which you've been trying to hack for years and do in different ways to not great effect. That for me is a very exciting one to look at. And I think particularly if you are a brand that has quite a wide SKU selection, that is a very good one to use because A, it can increase your AOV and your conversion. But secondly, it's going to give you lots of valuable data about what people are going for and aren't going for, much like you would with kind of upsells and cross sales. Another one I would say that I'm very bullish on is rebuy. And the reason that I like rebuy is twofold, really. One is from a sort of predictive upsell and cross sell perspective. We've seen that working very, very nicely. Some real big lifts off the back of that. So from my point of view, it makes my team look great because we are. But ultimately, again, from a client point of view, it gives them results. And I think they have, really kind of done very well in that space to
Definitely.
make something from a personalization point of view that is, A, easier to use than maybe some of their competitors. And I think B, from an impact point of view, are doing the right things. And they're also listening a lot to customers, which I think, is very, important now. Whereas, we're not just all a bunch of newbies in e-commerce. We're getting to say, well, we've got more of an established market. So that's another one I would say that I'm still, sort of very, very bullish on. And I think, the other things that are out there, I mean, look, subscriptions is another one that is always going to be a big play. Look, Recharge have been leading that field for a long time. But again, there are other people coming to the market as well. So I think it'd be interesting to see what happens then. Obviously, you've got native, Shopify. What I would say on subscriptions, though, is that what brands need to do from a CRO play is think very carefully about what and how they're offering subscriptions.
Yeah,
There's
big time.
definitely been that turn away from them in terms of like, okay, well, look, we go and get the subscription, we have the same thing each month. That is not flying anymore. People expect the ability to be able to turn those on and off very quickly. They expect the ability to create their own boxes and create their own bundles and subscriptions. So just having look, get this product again every 2 weeks,
Yeah,
that's dangerous. And I think you've probably seen this, Thomas. I know it's difficult to assess from a paid point of view, but when you have those conversions going through subscriptions, if they're then churning after 2 months, then it's a lot more expensive than you expected. So just I think subscriptions, yes, but do your research, talk to customers, ask them what they want, whether that's through NPS or jobs to be done surveys, get that first, and then build scripts after all. Just going, look, yeah, every month, every 3 months, it's shaking.
just to recap, so we have order editing. Yeah, I'm following Hamish online. So it looks like quite the journey there at the moment. Really exciting to watch. Rebuy, loads of our clients are using Rebuy. I've definitely, seen the impact in multiple stores really. And the last one there was obviously subscriptions. I actually think the best subscription package I've seen from a DTC brand was probably Huel. It's so flexible, and I think it hits all the notes that you just mentioned there. I think they're probably a little bit ahead of their time in making that as flexible and as customizable, maybe before some other brands. I suppose with the nature, the size of the business, and its probably reliance on subscriptions, it's not surprising to see a brand of that size really lead the way from there.
Yeah, I mean, Huel is a great example, Thomas. And I know Chris Traverse is the head of engineering out there who kind of built that whole system.
Yeah,
But it's a really, it's a really powerful thing that they've done. And I think, the interesting thing with Huel is that they always kind of, when they talk about themselves, is that they talk about themselves as a technology company that provides
yeah,
food products. And I think, when you get to that stage, you know, that's where, some real big investment can really kind of put you ahead of people. And I think, look, realistically, look, there's lots of competitors to Huel, but, they are still out there in terms of, the head and shoulders above their competitors. It's a hard space to go into. And we've worked with brands that have tried to go into that space against them, and they've found it very, very challenging. So yeah, good luck.
does spin the wheel really guarantee to quadruple your conversion rate?
Yes, of course it bloody doesn't. I mean, do you know what, Tom? This is the one thing that I kind of hate about e-commerce. It's this sort of like shiny thing syndrome, and the sort of the spin the wheel thing. I think we've still got one brand who is using it. And I think if you're at the start of your journey, it might work quite well. And for some brands that are fun and are more impulse type buy, and you've got the right customer for it, fine. But I think there's kind of this time where there's a lot more skepticism over
Yeah,
e-commerce sites. And I think we saw that over COVID because obviously everyone was online shopping. I think everyone in that period of a year started to become really kind of very good um, analysts of websites because we were spending so much damn time in them. And I think that's why the game had to change after COVID because people did have to level up. People were expecting a lot more. And these kind of gimmicky things that are there, yeah, for the vast majority, they don't work. I mean, I wish they did because we could charge people a shitload of money for installing them and then, make money. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
yeah, no, it's a refreshingly honest answer on it. So great to hear. We'll park the CRO there for a minute. I'd love to touch on Ecom Collab Club. Do you want to just tell the audience who maybe aren't familiar with Ecom Collab Club what it is, what it's up to, and I suppose what you're trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, definitely. So me and my business partner hate networking events.
So we created
Usually
one.
it's, it's warm wine, it's chicken in white wine sauce, all that crap. And when we start the agency, used to run Shopify meetups, which are great, good fun,
Yeah,
get people together. COVID happened, of course, it all went away. And after COVID, me and Pete said, look, what we want to do is do a networking event for e-commerce folks that we would want to go to, that's very informal and relaxed, and we'll get people to come along. And we started off with literally 30 people in a cinema at 8 o'clock in the morning in London. That has now grown to sort of about 150 people each month in London. And we've now got events in Dublin, we've got them in Manchester, Bristol, Toronto, New York. So it's basically a place where if you're an e-commerce brand, if you're an e-commerce agency, if you're an e-commerce tech provider, you come along, you're meeting like-minded people. We don't take things too seriously, as probably Thomas you can attest to. But what we do try and do is get people on stage who know what they're talking about and can give some valuable nuggets and information about stuff that is going on in econ right now. So it's been amazing. Sort of 3 years. I love it. I love doing it. I love being part of it. And especially when people come along and say, look, we've landed clients from this, or we've met a next agency from this. Like it's brilliant feeling. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And yeah, we're continuing to grow that through the rest of the year and into 25 as well.
brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I've probably been to maybe seven, eight, nine, could even be 10 at this stage between Dublin, Manchester, and London as well. And yeah, they're certainly great fun. They're certainly not your traditional
Nope.
corporate networking event, which is, I think it suits the industry down to a T because, most people who work in the industry would be just feel like a fish out of water at one of those real corp speak events that, tend to happen everywhere else. So I think
Definitely.
it's a real good, personal fit for people who work in this type of industry as well.
Yeah.
So,
I was
so
going to
you
say,
say
Thomas,
you're in,
the other thing as well is like with e-commerce, and this is one of the reasons that I love e-commerce is we've all come into this industry from lots of different entry points. And I think there isn't that kind of, old boys club mentality. I mean, look, when I
yeah,
started out my career, from from my uni, I went to be a consultant. So financial services, you can imagine the kind of the old boys club mentality. I don't think we have that in e-commerce. And that's
no.
what I think is so nice about it, in that people don't come in with that like, oh, I'm from XYZ. It doesn't really matter. We're all in this relatively new industry. And for me, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I often say nobody grew up like wanting to work in this industry. Nobody thought they'd end up in this industry. It's so new to a certain extent. So I think that rings true for everybody. Everyone kind of fell in a back door somewhere or other. Um,
Absolutely.
so you're not just in the UK. Obviously, I've been to a few of the events with Cubics in Dublin. You're around the UK, obviously, but you're in Toronto, New York. Did you mention Australia as well?
Yeah, so Sydney is happening on the 5th of September. So
Class.
that one is a sort of first one in Australia. And then we're looking at other cities as well. So some more European cities and the US as well. So yeah, all exciting stuff. And we've kind of got like an online community that's part of it as well through the school platform.
Yeah.
So we've got about 1,500 members in there. And that sort of then plays in, for people that can't attend the in-person events, but sort of then there's things in there like courses, masterclasses, ability to chat to the people in the industry as well. So we're just trying to create a hub of sort of online and offline things that just are useful for e-commerce folks and that people enjoy doing.
What's the like? where would you like to see Ecom Collab Club in the next 2 to 3 years? Obviously, you've gone, that's huge growth from just being in London at 8 o'clock in the morning in a cinema to being in all of those different countries with big expansion plans. Is the plan to really go for it in terms of more and more cities around the world, get more and more people involved, and really create that kind of community brand, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean it's twofold. I mean, one is that look from the core Ecom Collab Club events, we want to go to more cities, but I think what we're also very interested in is kind of the more smaller niche events. So we have something called the Big Fat Ecom Lunch. At the moment, we run one in Birmingham and we run one in Nottingham, which is run by Stefan, who owns Longcom Media, Longcom Consulting. So what we know is that look, a lot of the time, if you don't live in a big city, a lot of the bigger events are a little bit inaccessible. So we're
Yeah.
doing smaller events where maybe it might be 20 or 30 people, but still kind of giving that high level of value. And the other thing as well is look, we are an industry where we're constantly having to learn. So we have another kind of smaller event schedule called Ecom Collab Club Learning. And what we do here is we generally
Nice.
have between 7 and 14 people, and then we have a subject matter expert come in and do a very practical hands-on workshop. So it's not just sitting there looking at slides. You're literally, in some instances, there with a piece of paper and you're working stuff out, you're sketching stuff out, you're doing stuff that's physical around the room. So I'm very passionate as well as doing the bigger events, making sure that our professionals in our industry have got things that they can go to that help them with their careers as well. Because I think that's at the moment we're missing that a little bit in e-commerce. We've got the big showy events and the nice dinners, that kind of thing, but we just need to make sure we've got everyone covered, and that's the gap that we're hopefully going to try and fill.
2 points on that. I think that's such a nice play because there's nothing worse than just going into a room for 2 hours and just listening to a slide deck where it's just very stuffy. If you take something away from it, you're so much more likely to come back and bring people if it was valuable. And the
Mm.
one thing I love about your guys' events is that it's not salesy. It's easy to say, hard to execute, because a lot of factors at play. But that's one thing I love about going to your guys' event. You're not just going in listening to a sales pitch for an hour. And I think that's why it's done so well for you guys. And that's why more and more people are coming back to them as well. You always leave with the sense that you've actually learned something from the panel, or, laughing at whoever's in the hot seat for whatever questions that get thrown at them. But it's not a sales pitch that you're going into. And I think that's something that you guys have really executed on really, really well.
Look, Thomas, I appreciate you saying that, and that 100% is our objective. And I think, look, it's very difficult. And look, we've had a couple of instances, that people listening who come to Econ Club will know about, where tech providers have got up and just done a sales pitch in a panel. Nathan, my co-presenter, is very good at tearing people down, and a couple of people have felt the
Very
wrath
good.
of Nathan. But I think it's important to do that, because then it sets the precedent for the networking piece of those events. Is that if you've been in an environment where people are actively selling on stage, that's then going to carry through. And what we don't want to happen is people to not come because they feel like they're going to be sold something. Yes, there are sales type conversations going on. I can't deny it. Some people will try and pitch, but the vast majority, I think, like you say there, the mentality is, look, I'm going to go in. There'll be some people that I want to have a chat to, have a good chat to, understand what they do. And then that might be a connection that I can get off the back of it. And what's also I've loved is there's been lots of kind of, sort of splinter groups coming off the back of it. So we've got the Ecom's Ladies Lunch, we've got the Ecom Founders Lunch, we've got the CEO's Lunch that happens off the back of it. Nothing of this to do with us, but it's where people have sort of formed sub-communities, and they're then meeting and having these kind of conversations. And I think I love that. I feel like, for me, that's a really fulfilling part of what we've done, is sort of making sure people get together.
I think if you go into an event though like that and you are positioning, you're trying to give out as much value as possible, whether it's on a panel or in some of the learning discussions. If you're putting yourself in a position of authority where you're, helping everybody understand, I mean, that's the best sales tool possible if your
Exactly.
end goal is to sell. So I think it's a really nice flywheel effect where you're trying to build a community where people are incentivized to come in and educate people. That way, everyone attending the event is getting so much value. And, if you are selling something or you're offering some kind of service, you're putting your best foot forward. And, every business is so dynamic, different and unique that, you couldn't possibly speak to an individual brand and solve all of their problems on stage when you're talking to 100 people. It needs to be tailored for an individual approach.
I agree, and I think it's very similar. I think to the whole networking beast of LinkedIn, in the sense look that people feel this need to kind of beat their chest and sell and say how great they are and blah blah blah, and it's the people who've got the balls to actually say, you know what, look, here is some stuff that I know. I'm going to give it you free of charge. There's no expectation of what happens off the back of it, and it might help you. And I think if you can get to that mentality, which took me a long time to do in networking, I must admit, because I used to be one of the guys. Oh, it's blend commerce and blah, 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 do this and that. Like, so if you sit back and have the chat, and then if someone, for example, mentions like, actually, no, we're really struggling with conversions at the moment. Oh, okay. So what actually is happening? Well, people are coming to the landing page. Oh, actually, you might want to try this out. And literally, you can leave the conversation there. They're going to remember that. I mean, we actually worked with a client who came to our events 4 years ago, Shopify Meetup, and he remembered us from that event. And only literally a year ago, when he's ready to work with us, he came to us. Now, I know a lot of salespeople say, well, that's there's a long lead time, but ultimately, you've got to have these in your back pocket. There's going to be people that
100%.
you can sell to straight away, and there's going to be a lot of people who are not ready, but will be ready in a year, 2 years, or even 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. You just sort of got to buy your time with it. And I think now I'm getting older. I've realised that. I think in my sort of 20s and early 30s, probably not so much the case. I was a bull at the China shop, like just sell some shit, sell some shit, sell some shit, and it doesn't work because people
No,
are repulsed by it. It's like I'm wearing like dupe aftershave. People just want to get away from it.
I'm
No,
taking
no,
Jupe
just
and
we wear
decline to
dupe.
blend.
Sorry, my dad wears dupe.
um, Adam, if people are looking to get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Yep, perfect. So best thing to do is get me on LinkedIn, Adam Pearce, Pearce. And then equally as well, if you want to get in touch with me, my email address is adam@blendcommerce.com, and website is also blendcommerce.com. My LinkedIn profile has all the information on there about Ecom Collab Club. So if you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to come along, if you're a brand that would like to speak, or if you're a tech provider agency who wants to sponsor, let me know.
Perfect. We'll drop all those links in the show notes below. Adam, just want to say thank you very, very much for coming on today. Really, really enjoyed that.
Pleasure, Thomas. Me too. Thanks so much.
Cheers.